Hi, and welcome back to the Tiki Talk Show. I'm Ellie,
And I'm Ryley.
and today we have the pleasure to bring you another fantastic interview, this time with Mr. Mark Riddle and our artist spotlight, Robert Gonzalez, also known as Tiki Gonzo.
Mark Riddle is a prolific musician in the tiki scene. He's played with the Tikiyaki Orchestra, the Illegal Lineman Group, and now has 2 albums out for sale, Lahaina Sunset and Midday Mai Tai, both of which we talk about in the interview, and you're able to purchase those on his website.
Speaking of websites, Mark runs the Digitiki.com website and has since the mid-2000s. There he hosts the Quiet Village podcast and the Quiet Village radio show. The radio show is where you can go to listen to Exotica 24/7. He has a great playlist of Exotica where you can listen to calming, soothing, and sometimes quirky sounds from a decade long gone. And the podcast is where you go to dig a little deeper. There, he's curated specific selections of Exotica music and digs into the background behind each song.
I remember in January 2024, I think, I had a work trip for about a month and a half, but it was just down in Southern Virginia, so I was able to make the drive back home on the weekends. And anyone who's lived in the mid-Atlantic around the January timeframe, you know that on the trees there's not much to look at. So I would put on the Quiet Village podcast and drive from Southern Virginia up to Northern Maryland to where we live every single weekend, and I would put Mark's podcast on, both for the music, but also his commentary and the history that he brought with it. I remember listening and learning a lot about exotica music, the very thing that got me into the tiki scene, and just being impressed the whole way through. Mark also does this not only to spread exotica and music, but also for archival purposes, taking old, pristine records or master tapes and digitizing them so everyone can enjoy them and prevent these records from getting lost.
So enjoy our interview with Mark Riddle and listen as we talk about his many faces in tiki. From Mark Riddle, the serious musician who's put out Lahaina Sunset, to Marty Lush, the fun performer with the Tikiyaki Orchestra, to Digitiki, the music archivist. And stick around for our artist spotlight, where we talk with Tiki Gonzo about his shelves, his bars, and all of the other amazing tiki crafts he makes.
Aloha and welcome back to the Tiki Talk Show. I'm Ryley.
And I'm Ellie.
And today we're sitting down with Mr. Mark Riddle. How are you?
Aloha, I'm great. I just wish I had a Mai Tai. I was actually going to mix one up right beforehand, and I realized I have no limes.
Oh,
That's the worst feeling.
I guess I could just sip a solid shot of rum, but I didn't.
yeah, fair enough. At least it's better. You didn't get halfway through making the drink and then realizing I don't have what I need, because
Right.
that's another whole story.
I've done that before too,
Yeah.
I think we all have.
yeah.
So can you start just by introducing yourself a little bit to the listeners and tell us how you got into tiki?
Yeah, actually, I have 3 different names I go by. For my podcast, it's Digitiki,
Mm-hmm.
and then my kind of like my stage name, which just kind of happened, was Marty Lush, which is this character I always had in my head, like a washed up Borscht Belt comic. And he has to be named Marty. Martin's my middle name. So that's the
Okay.
Marty Lush thing, actually, half of me. So I worked up, and then my real name, Mark Riddle, which is just as crazy. So it's like, I answer to everything. So it's kind of weird. I mean, I started Digitiki before the Marty Lush thing, and that was my online handle for Tiki Central, which went away for a while, and now it's back. So that was neat. And then the Marty Lush thing kind of came in for more like comedy and onstage stuff. But then that record, the Lahaina Sunset, my wife is like, why don't you put your real name out there? Because you're doing something serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I should, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
So that's where that comes in.
And we were talking about it a little bit before the show. This is for our YouTube audience and Spotify guys. Just go check it out. But I have a copy here. Beautiful album cover. And we're excited to talk to you about this a little bit later on in the show.
Cool.
Kind of the story behind this.
Yeah. All right.
So, walking all the way back to when did you kind of become aware of Tiki? A lot of people either found it in the mid to late 90s through books by, or maybe even early 2000s by Sven, by Jeff Barry. When did Tiki enter your life, or you became aware that there was this thing in the mid-century that was like this?
At age 5.
Wow.
And I was born in 68, so that would make what, 73, 70? Yeah, about 73. Um, I was 5 years old, and I would come home from school to my grandparents' house, and they had one of those big old console
Oh yeah.
Westinghouse stereos that they gave away. And I wish we
Oh,
had that now.
Wow.
That thing, it had this little green light because it was all tubes. And
yeah.
when that green light on the front started to glow, you knew you could play something.
Yeah.
I love that thing. I played records on it all the time. And I got into my mom's record collection. And lo and behold, the first record I found was Bahia by Arthur Lyman.
Yeah.
And for those of you that might remember that cover, it's that beautiful silhouette of the palm trees with the moonlight. And I was just like, what is that? 5-year old. I'm just like,
Right.
whoa, this is cool. I popped that sucker on, and the first track is Bahia, and it just starts with the bass, doom, 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 doom,
Yeah.
and the jawbone going, and then all the bird calls, and I'm just like, wow. I played that record every day when I came home from school from that point on,
Yeah.
every day. I loved every song on that record, and it made me, it actually took me away in my head to I imagined a tropical jungle at night, you know, with the moon like on the cover and just some stream flowing through it. I totally was taken to another place with that, which is exactly what exotic is supposed to do.
Yeah.
5 years old, I didn't really get that, but it was like a movie in my head, that music, and I loved it. The other record that my mom had was Cal Jader, Mambo with Jader, and I played
hmm
that one all the time too. Loved it. So vibraphones were a big deal from
Yeah.
Yeah.
from day one. But yeah, it was that Arthur Lyman record that just it did it. And when I was a kid, we lived in San Diego, so once a year, my
Ooh,
mom would
nice.
she'd take me to Disneyland
hmm
once a year, and she'd let my friend who lived in the apartment next door to us. He was my best friend. So the two of she'd take the two of us to Disneyland, but she said on one condition, we got to get the first showing of the Tiki Room.
hmm
So even though my mom wasn't into Tiki, she was doing stuff with it.
Yeah.
She was interacting with, she loved the Tiki Room. And of course, she had the Arthur Lyman record. I was like, okay, right on. And that was it. And
Yeah.
I didn't actually, in my teens, it kind of fizzled out, obviously,
Yeah.
listening to Depeche Mode and hard rock bands and all that stuff. And, it fizzled out. But then in 2000, I moved to Los Angeles with my girlfriend, with my wife at the time. She was my girlfriend then. Um, and we wanted to set up a little bar in our living room. And I said, well, obviously we got to do a tiki bar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then we started researching it, and we found the Tonga hut, the original Tonga hut,
Yeah.
which was literally 5 minutes from where we were living.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
we went and scoped it out. We loved it. We sat there all night talking to people, having drinks. And then I started finding out, well, where can I get bamboo and stuff to build a tiki bar?
Yeah.
And I found Oceanic Arts.
Oh, wow.
And I remember going over there on a Saturday, and Bob Van Oosting, who was, one of the owners who sadly has passed just recently, um, there's nobody in there. And so he's talking to me, and I said, well, yeah, I kind of want to build a little tiki bar. And he goes, you're in the right place. He goes, everybody that comes in here wants to build a little tiki bar. He opens up this folder and shows me other people's tiki bars that they've given him pictures of.
That's awesome.
And
Wow.
I was just, so we're sitting there talking, and and I had no idea who the guy was. Now I do, but
Yeah.
at that time I was just like, okay, this guy, he
Yeah.
works here. And yeah, that was it. And I was off and running. And then I found Tiki Central. And then I'm like, there's other weirdos out there like me. Wow.
Yeah.
And from that point, it was literally, I just went off the deep end.
Yeah.
Everything was awesome from that point on.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You know, I'm glad to hear somebody say a positive thing about the Tonga hut at that time period, because I've heard other people to say that they remember, I can't remember who was saying it, but they're like, yeah, somebody was throwing darts at the Moai when he came in, or it was a beer joint and all that stuff. I don't know if that was going on when you went there, but it sounds like you had a pretty good experience if here we are talking some years later.
Yes, and I will tell you, it was a dive bar at that point, and there
Yeah.
was just locals that hung out. The place opened at 6 a.m.
Oh, wow.
and I actually asked the bartender at the time, who was the daughter of the one of the original owners.
Hmm.
And I remember going in there. I used to not work far away, so there were times I went in there for liquid lunch, I'm gonna say. And sometimes I go after work, and my wife would meet me after work, and we'd sit there for like 2 or 3 hours and have drinks. And it was a dive bar. The original, everything was still left in there that was
Yeah.
original.
Hmm.
And what I liked about it was that it was a dive bar. It was a neighborhood bar. The drinks were really cheap. They didn't know how to make a Mai Tai. Um, but the drinks were cheap. The decor was there.
Hmm.
Uh, Everybody was nice. You talked to them. I remember one time I went after work by myself, waiting for my wife, and this guy sits down next to me and he orders, rum and coke or something. And then at some point we started talking. He was a rocket scientist at JPL in
Wow.
Pasadena. And I was just like, hey, wow. I loved it. And I'm not
Hmm.
going to say anything bad about it, but it's different now because it's
Yeah.
so hip. You can't get in. It's huge. It's packed. The drinks are fantastic. They know how to make a Mai Tai.
Hmm.
But I love the neighborhood dive bars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my wife and I used to go out every weekend. We'd try and find one in the
Hmm.
neighborhoods around us, because where I live, a lot of the neighborhoods were built up in the 50s and 60s. And at that time, there was a bar on every corner.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the sad thing was, when COVID hit, all these little mom and pop bars didn't make it.
Hmm.
There's
Yeah.
still quite a few, but there was a ton more out here. And so we love to go find little dive bars because there's a lot of character,
Yeah.
and you wind up just talking to people. Quick story, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but this
No,
is
by all means.
true story. I met a guy who could have been Quint from Jaws at Tonga Hut. He was this old British guy, and I mean, he was, the guy must have been 150 years old, but he was an expat Brit, who was he was in the Navy during World War II when he was very young. And they started, I think they were in a year or two before the US got in. So he was in it for a while. And he was actually, his wife had passed years and years ago. His dog had passed years and years ago. And he was living in a van behind Tonga Hut.
Wow.
And he would come in every day and he'd just sit there and he'd have a beer and he'd milk a beer like for 3 hours, one beer.
Hmm.
And he would make a little extra money by sweeping up. He'd sweep up the parking lot. He'd sweep up Tonga Hut. He'd help him clean. Nicest guy, but he was so quiet. And I remember one time I'm sitting there by myself. I'm having a drink and he's sitting right next to me, right? And there's maybe like 8 people in the bar and it's in the afternoon, sitting there. And it must have been 30 or 45 minutes. He leans over to me. Can I swear on this channel?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So he leans over to me, and I swear to God, in this is exactly the way he sounded. He goes, "You see that guy at the end of the bar?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "He's a fucking asshole." And then he started talking to me about, yeah, that other guy, that redhead guy that comes in too, he's an asshole. And and then, we started talking a little bit. He wasn't a gabber though, didn't.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Yeah, I got into the war 2 years before you Yanks ever got in the war." And he goes, "We used to have one. The captain would give us one tot of rum a day." And I'm like, "Holy shit! I got to be recording this."
Yeah.
And he would take out his wallet. He'd show a picture of his wife, who was a nurse, and he'd give her a little kiss. Then he had a picture of his dog, and he'd give the dog a kiss, and he put it
Oh,
away, and he's like, "I'll have another beer, thank you." And I'm like, "This guy is Quint. Oh my God!"
you were in Piano Man. You were in the
It,
song. You were in the song Piano Man.
it was I'll never forget that. And there was a point where a bunch of the patrons at Tonga Hut got together to help him. They're like, he needs, something, needs a place to live, and needs some health care. Well, they find out all this time because he was British Navy, he had all of these benefits that I don't even think he knew about. So they contacted the embassy and they told him about him. They're like, "Oh yeah, he's got free medical. He's got all this pension and all this stuff." And so they got him hooked up.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah. That was a story, and that was the old Tonga Hut, and I miss that.
Yeah.
Although I love Jeremy and Murph, the owners now, they are
Mhm.
great and they've done a great job with it. And I really love the Palm Springs Tonga Hut, which
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
very cool.
it is.
I will say as much as I love tiki bars because you do meet a lot of very fascinating people. I mean, me at, 25, I'm able to talk to people who are probably high up enough in corporate America that I should not be allowed to talk to them. But here I am, they're buying me a Mai Tai or something. I do love dive bars too.
Yes.
I've
I
had a
do.
lot of very, very fun and interesting and probably lies told to me, but I'll call them stories. When someone's on their fifth drink or whatever, they'll just say whatever. But
Right.
um, yeah, there is something special about that neighborhood dive with the locals.
Mhm.
Or if the bartender sees someone walk in, they just yell, "Get out!" It's like
Right.
you might be in a good spot.
Somebody they knew, like, "You're not coming in here."
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, my father-in-law grew up in that era of the neighborhood bar. You get off from work and you go hang out at the bar for a couple hours. And
Mhm.
back then, each bar had their own dart clubs and they would do tournaments with other bars or softball teams. So it was like these fun little neighborhood meeting places, what pubs are in England basically, but
yeah,
it's a little less that now, but I love to walk into a dive bar and you get that dank smell. It's like, yeah,
yep.
this place has some patina to it.
It's picking up your old baseball glove that you haven't picked up in 10 years, and it just fits and it is worn in all the right ways. I love it.
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I love that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a darn good tiki bar too.
yeah.
So,
But we're talking a little bit about your early experiences in tiki. So I'm curious about, have you always been a musician, or have you always thought about this as an idea? Or was tiki and your love of music from an early childhood, that's what spurred you on later on in life? Or have you just always been involved in music?
well, as a kid, of course, listening to the records all the time, I was always into music, and I started music in grade school. And I started playing saxophone, believe it or not. And I was in marching band, I was in jazz band, I was in the drama band. I was in all those bands. And it was, I guess, early on in high school that I picked up piano.
Uh-huh.
And I loved piano more than saxophone. So that's where I was going. So yeah, I was always in music. Always enjoyed it. Um, and I always wanted to know more about it. And once I picked up piano, that's when things really exploded. Then I wanted to learn jazz and I wanted to learn
Yeah.
Latin music and all this stuff, which I did. And through the whole thing, I always had the vibraphone in the back of my head, but they're very expensive.
Yes, I've wanted some for a while. They're yeah, a
They
lot.
are expensive, even a used set. And it's also big and there's not many around. So it was something that I always just had in the back of my head. But it was after I moved out here to LA in 2000 that I really decided I'm diving into tiki music.
Mhm.
And of course vibraphone is the thing. So I was like, I got to start doing this because I want to play vibraphone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's really when it kicked in, was 2000.
Okay.
I mean, I know throughout the late '90s, you have Mondo Exotica that inspires a lot of interest into
Right.
exotic music, but then you also have lounge influence too, like the Martini
Mhm.
Kings and Combustible Edison. You have the Pulp Fiction soundtrack, which kind of launched surf, which means that kind of all the core elements that we normally assume are played in tiki bars were there. Do you remember what the early days of tiki kind of sounded like? If you went to an event or a bar, what were they playing?
Most bars didn't play Exotica or surf or
Hmm.
anything. In fact, there weren't that many tiki bars. I mean, I remember in LA it was Tonga Hut, but no one really considered it a tiki bar. They just considered it a dive bar. But it
Mhm.
was very tiki inside. You know, you could
Yeah.
still see it. There was the tiki tea, and that was it. It wasn't until later on that the Purple Orchid opened.
Hmm.
And then I'm trying to think who was after Purple Orchid. I'm not sure, but for a long time it was just Tiki Tea, Purple Orchid, and Tonga Hut. So they all played rock and roll. Even Tiki Tea, you walk in there, they're playing 70s and the Police and
Yeah.
yacht rock and stuff. And so it never had that. My wife's family is her sisters live in Tucson, so every time I go to Tucson, I'd go to the Kon-Tiki.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
go to the Kon-Tiki and they're playing rap and reggae and whatnot. So, you know, there wasn't a lot of exotica. There wasn't a lot of bands playing it either. At the time, there was basically, yeah, Combustible Edison. Um, and then what's the other one? I'm thinking, oh my gosh.
Like Martini Kings
Well,
or
the Martini Kings were around, but they were a little more like cocktail
yeah.
jazz. What is the name of that band? Something Kitty. I can't think of them. They do a lot of
Oh,
samples and stuff.
yeah.
Um,
Shoot, I can't remember the name, but I
I
know what you're
can't.
talking about.
I can see their album, and it's something Kitty. Them and Waitiki. That was it.
Hmm.
And then again, it was. I think it might have actually been at Tonga Hut that I met Jim Bakke from Tikiyaki Orchestra.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And Tikiyaki Orchestra didn't exist. He was just doing these songs to see if he could do Exotica. And
Right.
we talked for a while. He knew I was a musician, and then he said, "Can I send you the demos to see if I'm on the right track?" And I don't know why he thought I was an expert. I'm like, "Well, okay."
Yeah.
And I sent him back to him. I said, "This is awesome." I said, "Don't
Mhm.
change a thing. What you're doing is great." And then he put the record out, and then he started getting offers to play. And he called, I never forget this. He called me up. He says, "I just got an offer to play at Tiki Farm's party." He goes, "And you're gonna play it too." Okay.
Voluntold.
Yeah, so I was the first recruit for Tikiyaki Orchestra.
That's amazing.
And at that point, we were the only ones in
Uh-huh.
LA that were playing Exotica. And I
Mhm.
and I would say it was Exotica lounge surf. It was a good combo.
Okay.
And then of course now there's a lot of Exotica, but then there
Yeah.
wasn't much.
Yeah. So you became a podcaster in the early mid 2000s. You're one of like the early podcasters in that area. How did you get started with the Digitiki website, the Quiet Village podcast, and then the radio show?
Well, the podcast, I think it was '08 that I started.
Mhm.
And the podcast was really it was a technical exercise to see if I could actually do the coding for the RSS feed, which that sounds really technical, but it's that little document for everybody who's listening. It's that little document that basically says you're subscribed to this and it'll go look for the new episodes and download them. And so I did it. And my first thought was, well, I'm going to do a subject. I'm probably only going to do one or two episodes just to see if I can do it. What is it? And I thought, well, of course it's going to be Exotica because I was collecting it at that time. I was playing it. I was really into it. And there was one other podcast doing Exotic at the time, and it was called Vegas Vix Tiki Lounge.
Okay.
Wow.
And I listened to that regularly. And I didn't want to copy the guy. I'm like, well, shit, I don't want to copy the guy, but I'm going to do it anyway. And right
Uh-huh.
about the time I started, he quit. So I'm like, it was perfect.
Yeah.
And then I started getting emails from people telling me, I love your show. This is great. You're costing me money because I have to go find these records. And I thought, wow, somebody's actually listening. So then I just kept going, kept rolling. I never thought I would be this long with this many episodes. And I don't have as many as some people I know who've only been doing it for a few years and they do one a week. And I
Right.
can't, I can't do it because I have so much other things that I'm working on. But I'm still doing it and I still have ideas for episodes. So here we are.
Yeah.
So what's the differentiation between the radio show and the podcast?
Well, the radio show is it's a 24/7 server that's playing, and I'm not actually sitting there picking the songs. I have a pool of songs, and then there's some radio broadcast software on the back end that randomly picks them.
Okay.
And so um, I can go to bed and it's still on, which is nice.
Yeah.
But that was something again early on. Internet radio was very new. There wasn't much out there, and I thought, well, this is kind of perfect because it's weird because all the internet radio stations I would find were ambient beats, which at the time was very weird and very new, ambient and
Yeah.
synth. And I think there was a station that was all bird calls. That's all it was just bird
Huh.
calls. And I'm like, well, why don't I do a tiki station? Because it's kind of weird and it's the new
Yeah.
frontier. And I found a broadcast server that wasn't, didn't cost an arm and a leg because it was expensive. And so I signed up. I figured, well, I'll try it for 6 months and see. And I still do it because I turn it on and listen to it all the time myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fun.
Talking about those early days and it just being ambient noise, it almost sounds like what people put into a white noise machine, like bird calls and like just like the fall asleep music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, you're searching around for it, and then all of a sudden you hear Quiet Village, and then the bom 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 bom, and throws you right out of falling asleep, and now you have to go out and find that album.
Right. And that happened to me too. I mean, I would go in 2000, I would go to the swap meets
Yeah.
in LA and look through the record. And I remember looking through the records and you could find some of the biggies now that go for money. I found them for
Yeah.
$1 or $2. And then they started going up and up and up and up. And then as I got more into it, I had to go to eBay and start finding stuff. And I mean, I think $40 is the most I ever paid for a record.
Yeah.
And now some of them are like $100, $200.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely haven't paid $200 for a record before. That's who would do such a thing?
I know.
I mean,
I don't know. I can't.
yeah, I've only done maybe.
It's a handful of times
yeah.
and they've all been like collectibles.
Yeah, I if I turn it down now, I'm not seeing another one.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a big record collector, and I'll just offer this real quick. When I first got into record collecting, I was really into big band jazz, and that was my thing.
Oh, yeah.
Artie Shaw and Benny Goodman. I loved Artie Shaw. He was my favorite. And so slowly I kind of got into the later, like kind of the beatnik era of jazz and stuff like that, some of the bop stuff. I thought that was really interesting. And then I remember I would go to Goodwill all the time because there was one down the street from my house. I must be like 13 or 14 years old. And I started seeing, I remember I had an Arthur Lyman album. I was like, oh, this looks cool. And so I bought that. And then there was a local radio show that would play Twilight Hour, where they would play a little bit of doo-wop, soft stuff. And then they played Quiet Village one time. And I'm like, oh, now we're talking. It was the last 50s, 60s oldies station in Seattle. And I was buying Exotica records all the time. I'd pull them up for 50 cents, $1 and everything when I wasn't aware of it. But now that I'm aware, Exotica, after that, I can never find them anymore.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes. Yeah.
Well, Lyman had the cool covers too, lava volcanoes and shrunken heads and stuff. It's like, yeah, that's a cool. I don't care what the music is, I'm buying that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
just for the cover. That's actually how I found Robert Drasnin's Voodoo record. I found that and I pulled that out, and the original cover's that cool, dark red with the woman dancing, the guy's playing bongos, and I'm like, well, I don't care what's on it. I'm getting it just for the cover. And I took it home and listened to it, and I was like, wow, this is great.
Yeah. It goes back to what we were saying, I think, before the show, but the silver sticker, when you see hi-fi over the top, if it's cheap, pick it up. You're probably not going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, on your show, you play a lot from your own personal collection of albums.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Almost all of it is my own collection.
and I'm sure as a record collector, you do your fair share of crate digging. Do you have any like really big finds, like the Gene Rain, like possible to find nowadays, like while you're digging through? Do you remember any of those or any stories like that?
Yes. The two, and you named one, Gene Rains, and it was Rains in the Tropics was the first one I found. That was
Mhm.
another one. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know, but the cover's great.
Yeah.
Took it home and I loved every song. And I was really hooked on Gene Rains. And then eventually I found Lotus Land, which was his first one. And for the longest time I could not find the third one, which was something Tropic Rain. No, far. Oh gosh, Faraway Lands, something like that. I can't. My brain is fried. Um, that one took a while. But the other biggie that was really rare that I found, and it's a little cheesy, but it's a little fun too, is an evening at evening at the Royal Tahitian.
Okay.
And the Royal Tahitian was this big A-frame restaurant on a golf course in Ontario, California, which is out east.
Uh-huh.
And they did their own record, their own private release. And one
Oh, yeah.
side is the house band doing Exotica, and it's deep Exotica. And uh, they were called the Royal Tees, Tee, because they're on a
Yeah.
golf course. And then the flip side has got to be the house singer, Miss Henrietta Hank Hammond,
Hmm.
singing all these jazz standards. Um, Won't You Come Home, Bill Bailey? I Left My Heart in San Francisco. All of these songs with the band backing her up. And I was like, what is this? And I found out where it was. And then I realized it was never released. You could only get it at the restaurant.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's rare. And it was fun to find that.
Uh-huh.
I remember when I think this was about January of last year. I was having to drive down for work, about 4 or 5 hour drive. Um, I would stay up here, and we're in Northern Maryland, so I would stay up here during the weekends. I would drive all the way back down to where I had to do this whole training thing. And on that drive, it's January in the Northeast. There is nothing interesting to look at, and I'm sorry if I offended someone while listening, but there's nothing interesting to look at. So I put on your show because I go through, I want to listen to 20 minutes of music, and then, well, I want to hear also some like podcasts. And so rather than I don't want to text and drive. So but I remember your episode of talking about restaurant records exactly like
Oh,
that. That was so fascinating to me because this was a whole element of Exotica that I wasn't even aware of. Everyone hears about mugs and plates and silverware and toothpicks that were specific to whatever bar.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was me being a record collector and a tiki lover. I'm like, oh, there's a whole new world that I get to spend money on. Oh,
yeah.
fantastic.
And the restaurant records are harder to find because some of them, like the Royal Tahitian, they were just sold at the record. I mean, that it was a time, I think I said that on the show, it was a time when you went out to dinner, you went out, you got
Yeah.
dressed up, there were linen tablecloths, you spent the evening there, you had cocktails, you had the full dinner, there was usually live entertainment. And I'm sure some of these places, certainly some of the Polynesian and Chinese places, had gift shops.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did the records, and I love that. It's just so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
So you said in an interview in 2013 that the listeners of your show expose you to as much music as you share with them. Do you have a memory of a song or an album that a listener shared with you that really stuck with you or like was really memorable?
Boy, I don't, because there's so many.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I've met a few people who are like, wow, you must have the biggest collection in the world. You must know everything about Exotica. I'm like, no, I really don't. Um, you know, part of the reason that I chose the name Digitiki as my handle, because I like it digital and pristine as much as possible.
Hmm.
And so if people want to send me a copy of something, I'm like, yeah, just send me the rip of it. That's cool because I can take my laptop and my little external hard drive, and everybody's sending me texts right now. I'm sorry, these beeps
Okay.
are driving me nuts. And I can just put them under my arm, and I don't have to bring crates and crates of records if I want
Yeah.
to play a DJ thing. And I know that there's a certain nostalgia about spinning the records, and I get it. But I'd love to have 10,000 songs in my hand rather than
Right.
a crate upon crate upon crate upon crate to get 10,000 records. So a lot of the stuff I have is digital, and a lot of is because people would send it to me. So I don't really have a particular one that I can call out, but there's
Mhm.
so many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always. I mean, almost like on a monthly basis, somebody says, "Have you heard of this one?" I'm like, "What the heck is that? I've never heard of it." And now I've got to go find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking to Sven Kirsten recently, and we asked him,
Yeah.
like, are there still mysteries of the first wave, the pre-Tiki era, whatever? And he was, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I hope there always is. And, I think that's always great. And you mentioned the digital element of the music. There's also an archivist angle there, if I'm not mistaken, right? You do a lot of this for archiving this music.
I do because I feel it needs to be preserved, and it's almost like architecture. There's
Mhm.
a point where it's not old enough
Mm-hmm.
to be officially preserved.
Right.
It kind of bothers me. It's like, there's beautiful Googie architecture in LA,
Yeah.
and it's always getting torn down because it's
Mhm.
just not old enough yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And that bothers me because it's so fascinating. Music is the same way. There's a point where it falls out of favor and it's not old enough yet, and then a point where it's rediscovered, and then everybody's like, where is this? Well, I'm sorry, all the master tapes were destroyed.
Yeah.
And uh there's a lot of people. In fact, there's a friend that online that I talk to constantly. His name's Don. He is working very hard to preserve some of these tapes that he gets. He gets the reel to reels. He actually has some master tapes from old Hawaiian records that he
Wow.
is like high quality digitized. And I have a feeling the original owners of these probably don't feel that they're worth that much, or they weren't
Mhm.
at some point. I mean, Jeff Chenault, really good friend of mine, who wrote the liner notes for my most recent project, he finds stuff, and he knew the house band for the Kahiki in Ohio. And
Wow.
the guy had a whole closet full of reel-to-reel recordings of them in the restaurant that they were going
Wow.
to do a record, but then he's like, well, no one was interested. So, and here's all these recordings.
Yeah.
And so there is a certain level of archiving. And I know that there's this copyright issue. And sometimes it's like, well, are you really breaking copyright? I think it needs to be preserved. All of these mid-century albums need to be preserved. And there's still a ton that have never been officially released digitally. And I don't know if they've been
Mhm.
digitized or if there's even tapes left to digitize, and maybe just the LPs. The Gene Rains records are lost. The
Yeah.
masters were lost. Yeah, there was a huge fire at Universal. And I forget what year, but a lot of master tapes went up. I mean,
Mhm.
biggies and a lot of Decca, and he was on Decca.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was huge names. And when I was working with Real Gone Music to release the Gene Rains CD compilation, they worked to get the rights from Universal Music, who owned Decca at the time. And he told me the story. The guy at Real Gone, he said the minute we finished signing the papers, the guy said, and now the tapes don't exist. He's like, they've been destroyed. And through talking with him and through kind of piecing things together, I realized they were in that fire.
Yeah.
And so that's it. The LPs are all we have, unless some family member of Gene Rains has safety copies.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just actually met his niece, so that was neat. So I've been
Oh, wow.
just met his niece, so I've been talking to her about Gene Rains.
Yeah.
I think I always go back, and I'm gonna butcher this quote because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's something to the effect that culture is at the highest risk right before it's appreciated.
Yes.
And even though we have the Tiki revival, we have the mid-century revival, we have the Googie appreciation, all this stuff, it is still aired in some type of way of kitsch. And so there's still kind of that ironic detachment from it being an actual art form that people will see those things and it's like, oh yeah, yeah, Grandpa Rain's records or Grandpa Gene's records or his old master tapes. Ah, who needs? And that's not disparaging his fan. I'm just using it as an example, of course. But
But it's true.
we talk about the Kahiki, and a lot of that stuff went to the dump, and
Mhm.
nobody thought any different. And so there is a lot that is just at risk right now of unfortunately being lost and not being recovered at any point.
Absolutely. And I think out in your area, there's the Kowloon. That is it
Yeah.
closed or it will close?
It will close soon.
We're going next week to see it before it
Oh,
closes.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're listening to this
Right
in the
on.
future, we've already been. So if you're
was
gonna head out there to
fantastic.
try to get us, sorry. Yeah, it was great. We loved it. I've another question. This isn't not for anyone listening, this is me just giving an honest review of your album, Lahaina Sunset. I'm gonna pull it back up one more time. Beautiful album cover. We talked about the silver sticker. If you're watching on YouTube, check that out. This is my honest review. We talked about it before. I read a review on it in Exotica Modern, which was much more eloquent than what I'm about to say. It's fantastic. That's my review. Could you just talk to me a little bit about how this project came to be? I mean, the liner notes on the back that you wrote are fantastic, and then I know that in that area, unfortunately, there's been the fire and everything. But I'd be really curious to talk about how this album came to be, and then now a couple of years out from it, or a little while out from it.
Well, I mean, I'm sure as anybody who listens to it that collects Exotica will know it's very Arthur Lyman-y, if that's a word. Lyman-y,
It is now.
Lyman-esque. So it just kind of naturally happened that way. My wife and I, we got this Costco sale on a trip to Maui. And it was really good price. And I got to give her props. She just said, "We're going." And I'm like, "Okay." And it was in this little hotel that was in Old Lahaina. So it was away from the big resort. So it was a cheaper stay. But the cool thing about it was we were in the little town, the old part of Lahaina, and I would not change that. The hotel is still there. It survived the fire, but everything around it that we went to didn't. I remember we'd get out of our hotel, we'd go left, and we'd just walk down the street past this grade school, and then we go, and this is all along the water, and the wharf is there, the courthouse with that giant banyan tree, and we get our coffee and just walk around and look at the shops and walk along the waterfront there. It was the most relaxed I have ever felt in my life. And I think I even said it in the liner notes. I exhaled. I literally felt my whole body just go, ah. It was like suddenly we didn't need to go everywhere and see everything. It was like, nope, I'm fine just sitting here with my coffee or my Mai Tai. And we'd go get coffee, we'd go have lunch. We would sometimes go to the liquor store and get booze, and then we'd come back and sit on the veranda. We were on the fourth floor, and it's big sliding glass doors. And we'd sit there, and there was Lanai just out, just like Bali High. It was just out of reach, but it was there. And we'd just sit there and listen to the ocean. And at night, there was a place next door. It wasn't a hotel. It's a place next door, but they did a nightly luau. So we'd have the windows open and we're listening to the surf, and you'd hear Hawaiian singing and drums, but it was far in the distance. The first track on that record, that is actually me recording it with my phone.
Wow.
Yeah, you'll hear this kind of singing in the distance and some drumming. That is really that luau that we were listening to from our balcony. And I didn't plan on making a record. I just soaked it up as much as I could. I loved old Lahaina. I just fell in love with it. Um, but where it came in was I got back, and a really good friend of mine, uh, Andy Nizal, who's Tiki Joe's Ocean. He's the group Tiki Joe's Ocean. And he called me. He says, "So," and the first thing he says is, "Were you inspired to write music?" And I thought, what a great question. I said, "Yes, I was." And I told him, I said, I was noodling around with this melody, and I think I'm going to write something out of it. And that was the first track, Lahaina Sunset. And as I wrote it, it just came out. I mean, it was just like it was already there. I just blah, there it is. And I thought, well, I'll write another one. And I wrote, I think it was the second one, which is Moon Over Lanai.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just thought, you know what? I'm going to try and do a record like this, one that's dreamy, because everybody at that time, they're all doing surf and they're all doing up tempo lounge, and everything's got a beat. And I thought, I'm going to slow it down. And I said, I'll bet nobody's going to buy this because it's going to be too sleepy, but I'm going to do it. And I just, all of these songs just flowed out of me, and it was all from the memories.
Wow.
And I will tell you, that was the most effortless record I've ever worked on. And then the cover is a picture. We were sitting in these shade lounge chairs on the beach in front of the hotel the last night, and we were both pissed that we're going home. Like, God, can we stay? Is there a way we can stay longer? I don't know. And I just clicked with my phone, took that picture, and that was the cover. So I mean, all of that record is from my stay.
Wow.
That's awesome.
The sad part was, like you said, it was maybe 5 months later that we woke up in the morning to the news that Lahaina was burning down.
Yeah.
And I was devastated because I loved that place. I really adopted it in my heart as a muse. And we were watching it like it was happening in our own town, and we recognized all those places, like, oh my gosh, that place, that place, that place. And they're all gone. That hotel, though, we stayed at made it through.
Wow.
It's still there, but nothing, right? It looks like a moonscape around it.
Yeah.
And the restaurants we went to, the little coffee shops, I bought my wife a little necklace at Nahoku there, and it was in the little area, and it's gone too. It was just like, wow, it was devastating.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
your
so
newest.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, after you.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I did it because the record had just come out not long before that, like a month maybe. Then I was like, well, you know what? All the sales for a month, I'm gonna dedicate to the Red Cross, like everything.
Yeah.
And it was pretty good. I mean, I managed to give them a fairly good donation. I didn't want to, I was kind of iffy because I didn't want it to sound like a gimmick, like, hey, this is a reason for you to buy my record. But I was like, it's written about that town, and I loved it, and I want to do something. And so, that was what I did.
Yeah. Trying to make the best out of like a really unfortunate situation.
Yeah. That was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard to see.
So your newest LP, The Midday Mai Tais, just came out last month. And I understand that originally it was supposed to be more of a compilation album, and it turned into a collaborative effort. What was the process like working with all those other musicians in the world of Tiki on this collaborative project?
It was fun, and it actually started. Darren Long of the Tiki Delights and Mike Young of Mr. Moai and the Tiki Heads, they actually, I knew them online because they'd sent me their songs to play, and I played, and I was like, these are great. So we got to know each other, and I interviewed them on my show, and if you've ever met somebody that felt like you've known them for decades,
Mhm.
That was it. I mean, like we were instantly, it's like, well, we must have known each other in a past life or something.
Yeah.
We just became like instantly, we had known each other forever. And so we stayed in touch, and I happened to do this show. It was a tribute to Herb Alpert, and it
Yeah.
was in Palm Springs at the casino. They have this big jazz club that does weekly jazz series, and I put together the whole band. I wrote out all the charts, and we did the whole whipped cream record front to
Yeah.
back, which I don't think anybody's ever played the whole record. So we did the whole whipped cream record, and they bought airline tickets and came out to see it. And I was just like,
Wow.
wow, I that blew me away. I mean,
Yeah.
and so we hung out for a couple of days out in Palm Springs, and Rory Snyder, the owner of the Reef Bar,
Mhm.
who also puts on Tiki Caliente event, he and I are friends. I mean, he's, like family. So we were all hanging out, and one I mentioned to them, I said, you know what, we each have our own little groups of fans. I said, what if we put a compilation together
Mhm.
to kind of grow our base, introduce my fans to your fans and your fans to mine, to you.
Mhm.
And they loved the idea. And they got back home, and Darren lives in Nashville.
Okay.
Mhm.
And we got back home, and he said, yeah, I like that idea. He goes, but I wrote a new song and I'd like to put it on there. I'm like, okay, you doing an original. Okay. And then Mike is like, yeah, I got one that's almost finished. I think I'll do that one too. And then we'll do the regular songs
Yeah,
from our
yeah,
other
yeah.
records. And I'm like, no, you're not. I'm gonna write one too. And at that point, it turned into, no, we're just gonna do original tunes by all of us. And we all
Yeah.
played on each other's tracks. So it was really collaborative, even though we're all 3,000 miles apart. We would listen to the demos and say, well, what if you went to the B section here, or what if you repeated this one section there, and then we'd work on it. So it was very collaborative. And then uh, Mike from Mr. Tiki, he knew Connie Manakura from the Manakuras.
Yeah.
So we brought him in, and so he played steel, and he threw in an original tune. And next thing you know, we had a this collaboration of all original tunes that we'd never planned on, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And I'm like, well, we got to have some cool artwork, and this has got to be, it's got to be on LP, and it just went from there. And we all
Yeah.
had so much fun doing it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So was the album recorded each individually where you lived, or did you all get together and play, or how did that work?
No, it was recorded separately.
Oh.
Everybody had their own little recording
Uh-huh.
studio. Darren actually, there's a recording studio that he works with near his home, so he recorded his parts there. Mike had his studio, and Jeremy Connie Manakura, he has a recording setup in his house, so he could record high quality stuff, and then we would just send the digital tracks back and forth. We'd throw them into our digital audio workstations, and
Mhm.
we each mixed them down. The interesting thing is it all sounds like one collective mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
And that was the thing I worried about. I'm like, well, something not, it's going to be really choppy. It was great.
Yeah, you never would tell, like, listening to the songs, that they would have been like separately recorded or kind of like piecemeal almost.
Yeah, yeah, it was. And to everybody's credit, there wasn't big egos. Everybody was like, yeah, hey, I loved your track, but that one little section, it would be cool if you could add this. And I'd go back and re-record it
Yeah.
Mhm.
and send it to them. So we really collaborated a lot, and that was nice. I really enjoyed that. Collaboration is
Mhm.
really good for the soul.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we really appreciate your time, and we just want to. So we mentioned a couple different ways that people can hear your podcast or hear the radio stream. If you could just mention those, and then do you have anything else upcoming? I know you just put out an album, but any other shows that people can look out for if they're in the area, anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I just finished Exoticon, which was nice because it was the first time I did my tunes off of that record.
Yeah.
And that was nice.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Okay. So the pitch, digitiki.com, which just Digitiki .com. And that's, you can listen to the radio station there, 24/7. You can play the podcasts. They're all streamable there. And there's a list of all the tracks on each podcast. Or you can you can subscribe to the podcast, which is free. There's a lot of other places like TuneIn and whatnot that carry the radio station, so you can
Mm-hmm.
find it outside of the website. Um, what else? You can get the album and the flash drives, which I got to mention the flash drives.
Yeah.
Which I, instead of doing CD, I did these little bamboo flash drives, and because you can put so much more on there, and I had them laser etched. So, because most people don't have CD players anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, my wife, her car is got a USB thing. So I just plugged it in. I could play it in her car, which is
Oh,
great.
wow.
That's awesome.
That's nice. So I did that instead of a CD, and people seem to really like it. Plus, they look cool. It's a bamboo.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can check that out. And as far as what I'm doing next, I'm actually working on the second record.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm working on the follow-up, which is going to be a little more up tempo, but it's still going to be very much in that same vein. The little four-piece combo, deep exotica, but there's a few more little more up tempo-ish tracks, all originals again. Um, I I'm a side man too. A lot of people will call me and say, "Can you record this and this track for me?" So I don't I've got so many ideas in my head, it's hard to pick them. And right now I just want to get that one finished. Um, I've already talked with a couple of the guys from the Midday Mai Tais, and they want to do projects with me, just like them and me, that one and me.
Yeah.
And so we've got all these ideas we're batting around. So I've got so many different things. I don't know how many more shows I'm going to do because I really want to work on the production, get it over.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I did recently at Tiki Caliente was I put together a Latin band, kind of like Cal Jader,
Mm-hmm.
the 5-piece with vibes, and it's called the Mambo Combo, of course. And everybody went nuts for that.
Yeah.
So now I want to record a Mambo Combo record, and I'm starting to get gigs. People are asking me to come play, bring the Mambo Combo, and it's these tiki groups. And I'm like, you don't want Exotica, you want Mambo? And they're like, yeah, bring that. So that's fun. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but that's another one that's in the hopper. I want to finish the Exotica record, the follow-up to Lahaina Sunset, and then I want to do Mambo Combo, and then I have these other projects that are already starting to take shape. And I also just finished scoring a film.
Really?
It's a
Wow.
documentary. It wasn't shot on film, it was video. It sounds way more exotic than it is, but I'm hoping it's going to come out this year.
Awesome.
It was a documentary, and it was somebody I knew through somebody I knew who
Yeah.
needed some music, and I sent some tracks, and the person putting it together was like, I love them all, I'm going to use them. And then they came back, can you do something like this? Can you do something like this? Send them the tracks, like, yeah, I'm going to use everything you've done. So next thing you know, I'm doing all the music, and that was fun.
That's awesome.
That was a blast. But I wish I could show it to somebody, because it sounds like I'm lying when I say, yeah, I scored a film, but
something to look forward to for sure.
Yeah. It's not out. I can't show it to you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We've had an absolute blast.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I talk too much, I'm sure.
No.
I do. I think I talk too much. My wife says I talk too much.
Well, you told us about your love of dive bars and the captain from Jaws, Quint.
Yeah.
And then now we're finishing it off that you are scoring a movie. So we had a big arc there. So I wouldn't say you talked too much because we got to two very cool spots at least.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, it's almost like billiards, just like I'm a billiard ball getting knocked from here to there, and who knows where I'm gonna land. But it's fun.
Yeah.
I'm having a blast.
Good.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we
All right.
appreciate it. All right.
Aloha. Thank you for having me.
Aloha, everyone.
Thank you again to Mark Riddle for joining us on this week's episode. We had a lot of fun talking, mostly music with you, but so many other things in Tiki. Be sure to check out his website, digitiki.com, and his newest album, Midday Mai Tais. Everything will be linked down in the show notes below, and thank you again to Mark for joining us.
Now turning over to our artist spotlight this week, we have Robert Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez has been in the Tiki for over 50 years. In the interview, we talk about him going to the Tikis way back in the 1970s, bringing his family there and enjoying it, and then how he was pulled back into the Tiki scene after he spent a career in furniture making. He was pulled back in by his daughter when he started attending the Don the Beachcomber marketplaces. And then he had the inspiration to start making amazing Tiki shelves. He shows us some of the new projects he's working on, some of his inspiration. So if you're listening to this via Spotify or another podcast form, make sure you go check him out on Instagram. Again, all of his social media and everything you're able to find him is going to be linked down in the show notes. But we hope you enjoy this interview. And today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Robert Gonzalez, aka Tiki Gonzo. How are you, sir?
I'm doing perfect. Thank you. How about you?
Good.
Doing good.
Thank you.
Doing good.
Can you introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about the type of tiki art that you make?
Sure. Yes. Like I said, I'm Robert Gonzalez, aka Tiki Gonzo, and I make tiki style shelves and bars that go along with any tiki decor that you may have. I also make a lot of customs in that field. Started. I don't know if you want me to go started. I started back in 2010 when I thought I was going to retire soon. I didn't know when. Soon. So I started looking at things. What am I going to do as a hobby? I'm not going to sit in front of the tube and go, oh.
Right.
So then my daughter used to do the shows at Don the Beachcomber.
Oh, yeah.
She had little things. And so I started going, and I just joined her making little trinkets, like frames, paintings, and things like that, and lamps. As a matter of fact, I have one back here still left over. There it is. See?
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Was that Havana Club?
Yeah, after I consumed the goods, I had to do something with the bottle,
Yeah.
Make good use of it, yeah.
Make some use of it. So I kept one of it. So, but one of the things I noticed in attending those down the Beachcomber shows was that too many people were making lamps and things, so I wasn't interested in that. But one day, there was this event down the Beachcomber where this guy was selling mugs at, and you know how much they are. And so I started looking. We bought one too, and but I started looking around and say, wait a minute, where do we put these things? I have shelves in my tiki room, of course, but I said, so I started asking the people around, hey, where are you putting your beautiful mug that we just got, and you just striking a conversation, and they said, oh, the mantle or here or there, nothing. I said, okay. So now the next event I designed this shelf, and I brought it to the show, and we raffled it. Every person that came into the booth, whether you purchased something or not, just walked in, you get a ticket, put it in the bin, and at about the end, an hour before the show ended, we had the raffle, and the person took the shelf. So next event, I said, well, let's bring a couple. And I did the same thing, and the crowd started going, and I felt like like a drugged pusher, you know, basically because people were there, you know, at on one of the I think that was a third or fourth show event. Everybody was there. I mean, it was just amazing. I had 3 shelves to give, and so I said, "Oh my God, I feel like a drug pusher." It's unbelievable, you know. So I said, "Well, this is it. I think I'm gonna start bringing and selling it because it's more profitable, I think."
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started designing. Next event, I brought 3 or 4 different models and designed this. You know, every time something came in my head at 2 o'clock in the morning, get up and draw something. Okay. So, you know, it was very exciting.
Yeah.
And so I retired in 2016. So 6 years later, I retired, and I had about maybe 50 different designs of shelves.
Wow.
And so after I retired, I started adding to my collection, and right now I have something like 120 different designs. And of
Wow.
course, I don't make them all, but I've made them all, of course, but
Yeah.
not all the time because, you know, it's just unbelievable. I cannot do it. And about 5 different type of styles of bars, and from mid-century style to, of course, a basic tiki shelf bar, and stools as well. So
Wow.
that's the short end of it, I guess. The how I became that, you know, and you know, here's some of the more designs here. Let me see if I can.
Wow.
If you can see
Wow.
that, this regular standard design, and this is one of the new ones that I'm working on. Let me get my finger out of the way. There we go. That's down there.
Yeah.
Let me see if I don't know. I cannot tell. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So that's some of the that I'm working on. It's got a little guy down here too.
Okay.
Wow.
So it's not completed yet. It still needs a backing, and thinking of putting tiki torches. We'll have tiki torches.
Oh, wow.
What kind of background we're gonna put yet, but it'll be ready for the next event that we're gonna have at Tonga Hut,
Very
It's
nice.
exciting.
July 13th.
Awesome.
So was it back in 2010 when you started going to Don the Beachcombers when you got into tiki, or do you have a history prior to that that you were aware of the tiki style?
Oh God, yes. Well, I always liked tiki. As a matter of fact, we used to go to the Tikis over in San Gabriel.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I'm sorry, Monterey Park.
yeah. The amusement park, right?
No, it was a fabulous restaurant type of
Oh,
entertainment.
that's right.
They had volcano. They had tiki dancers. I mean, hula dancers, fire dancers. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Of course, they shut it down, but I don't know why. But I mean, it was I haven't seen anything like that again. And I've gone many times to Hawaii, and they come close, but
Yeah.
I want. I mean, the tikis. It was amazing, and this is back in the 70s.
Yeah.
so I you know, so even my kids, you know, I got them involved in that when we were going to the tikis, you know. Hey, we'll just go there for the weekend, and a couple of a night, you know, we go dinner and have a few drinks, dance, and all that, you know, have a good time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you were saying that you retired back in 2016. And if I read correctly, you had a history in furniture design before for your career. Could you talk a little bit about how you took those skills and then transferred them into the tiki world? You said that people had a lot of mugs, nowhere to put them, and then how you decided coming about that. Can you talk about some of those early days when you first started designing the shelves and made that jump into the tiki world?
Correct. Well, you know, I started working in wood. Well, the 70s, I started working for JBL and the cabinet area, and the cabinet where we used to make the cabinets for the speakers and things like that. And so I got hooked on the furniture, you know, how all the intricates, the machineries, and how do you make them and all that. And I started designing a few things, and And one of them took hold, showed it to one of the engineers, and he saw it, and they made it into a product, and I didn't get anything for it, but then from there, of course, I went to this company was made back in the late 70s, early 80s, made waterbeds furniture.
Oh, yeah.
Out of solid pine and Ponderosa pine, as a matter of fact. And so there, I didn't get it to get it designed anything, but I was involved a lot with the engineers, you know, being in I was started in quality as a quality manager. And so I started with them, and I learned a lot of things through them that I was able to apply later on in other companies that were office furniture, home furnishings, and things like that. So knowing the intricates, how to design and how to make something last, like for example, a bar stool that I make, I mean, you can stand an elephant on it, it will not fall apart. Believe me. And that's because I know all of the standards for and the testing that you have to conduct to make sure that it lasts and it doesn't fall apart. So and so again, you know, going to the sticky events with my daughter down the Beachcomber, I was able to, you know, see some of the designs, you know, that they had with the tikis and what have you. And I said, oh yeah, I can incorporate this. And also I like the mid-century styles a lot. And of course, you know, none of those, I made some mid-century styles for the home furnishings, and they didn't like it, but then that was the 70s, you know.
Yeah.
And so I started applying what I liked, what I saw in the tiki community, and applied it and made the shelves. And then I put fabric on the back as a background, which I think I was one of the first ones to do that. Nobody else did that. I mean, there was one person that did shelves, you know, he put things together and made a shelf. It's fine, you know, it looked good, but there was no background. And, so I started putting a background too. I started putting fabric and other things like that. And so, I mean, people liked it. Oh, and another thing that I started doing is putting a lip on the.
Oh.
Right, yeah. So if you see this little guy here, of course, you know, you have this bamboo lip in there. Now, as you know, we're in Southern California, and what happens in Southern California is a lot of shaking. So they have the mugs and all, they have a tendency to travel, walk away from the edge and fall. So that prevents it from that happening. So I started doing that again on it. So, and so those are the things that I apply, you know, my knowledge that I learned with building furniture, chairs, and bedroom sets. I applied it to what I make.
Wow. So you do more than just work in wood and fabric. I saw a picture of a shelf you made out of those jade ceramic tiles that won the Tonga Hut's art show. How did you make the jump into using other like mediums in your art?
Well, yeah, I saw I always wanted to use the breeze styles, incorporating somehow into my shelves, my bars. But you know, the price was kind of out of my range for what I can sell them for, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So having a couple of CNC routers helped me, and I designed the tiles and applied and made them out of wood. Of course, you know, they're not the expensive type of ceramic that they have, but at least they look very, very good.
They do.
Yeah.
So I applied that, and I was able to make them with my CNC router.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Right.
So you also make bars, not just shelves, and you have bars in commercial spaces there in Southern California. What was the process like to get approached by these commercial bars and make something special just for them?
Well, I think it was basically word of mouth, you know, and going into bringing the bars to the shows, to the events, and they would see it as well as the stools. They would see it, and they will ask a lot of questions as far as how sturdy is it.
Yeah.
So after I showed the construction and all that, those that wanted to know how it's built, I would take my time and I show them why it's so strong. And I think that's what drove them to purchase a few, and some of those are customs that I make specifically for them. Whether I would put their name carve their name on the front or not. Yeah, right now I'm making a bar for this person that lives right here by the mountains, and as you know, Southern California, black bears are quite a lot, but specifically for this house, her house, for some reason, the bears love it. And so every day, it's just a confrontation with the bears, and the bears are not, So they call their home. They call it the Casa de Oso, which means bear's home, or house of bears. And so I'm making the bar for them, and I put I'm sorry for the dogs.
No, that's all right.
I put Casa de Oso. I carved it in front of the bar, so that's what they wanted. So I do a lot of customs as well.
I think you've been caught on picture doodling away at some of your shows and dreaming up new designs. How do you get inspiration for like your new shelf and bar designs?
It just comes to me. I don't know. I've been thinking about Hawaii, like or just somebody mentions something, talk to me, I see, or I see a display, I see a fabric, and somehow it just triggers something in my brain, and I have to get a pencil and jot it down, because I'll lose it. I'll lose it. And then I try to remember what it was, and so that's why I have to jot it down. Or like I said before, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, there it comes. Wait a minute, what if I do this? And I have to get up, otherwise the next morning I won't remember. It just happens.
Yeah, the sign of a true craftsman. It just comes to you. You don't know when, you don't know where. It'll just come to you.
Yeah.
Exactly. They give you an example of that corner unit that I displayed at Tonga Hut with the breeze tiles. I was just talking there, and I had a couple of other shelves or various ways, with a tile. And the guy was looking at it, he bought it. He bought that one particularly. And he mentioned something about a corner unit, and that was it. That triggered it. So I had to get out of here. I got to write something down. I had to decide it, because otherwise, But that's how that one came to me.
Wow.
Corner unit.
So not only is the stuff coming to you and you can just build it and you figure out how you want to do it, but you also share with other people of how to build these. You do in-person seminars. Could you talk a little bit about, if someone were to attend these, what all comes with it, what they get taught, and then how you decide to start doing these?
Well, my daughter helped me with that. She said, "Hey, why don't we have some sort of a class, and show people how to put the fabric on, or build a shelf type of thing." And I say, "Hey, that sounds like a good winner. Let's do one." So the first one we held, we had the shelves pre-made, and we had a few different styles, and we had a selection of fabrics that they can choose, and they will, if they like the shelf, they will pick it. They get they'll select the fabric, and then I show them how to apply the fabric to the backing. And that's how we started, and it was really, people loved it. And then next we had about the third or fourth, we made it so that we had the components of parts, and they will assemble the shelves.
Yeah.
And pick the fabric as well. So it was more of an intense type of thing, and it really was success. I mean, the people loved it. But the last one we had was nothing but women in there, right? It was
San Diego Women Grove.
yeah, and it was nothing but women. So you know, and I bring all the tools. I bring everything. All they have to do is show up, and I have fixtures, and they will apply. You know, they'll show them how to give them a little kind of a little introduction to the tools and the safety end of it. We don't want injuries and things like that. So after we show them how to operate tools and what to be careful about, then we proceed to the building of the shelves. And once they have the shelf built, then they select the fabric, they put they glue the fabric onto the backer and install it. And they're happy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool that you're sharing like your process with people. And like you were saying, when the commercial bars were coming to you looking for bars, you didn't have any problems showing them how things were made, because I know a lot of times in the tiki space, creators very closely guard their secrets and stuff.
Yeah, which makes
but
sense.
It's really awesome that like you're putting these classes together and just like giving people the tools to feel brave enough to pick them back up again.
Well, the way I figure, you know, not too many people have a CNC router.
Yeah.
Or how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can use CADs, drawings, and apply that, convert them to vectors and then into the machine. You know, there's another software for it, and then you have, so, you know, altogether, when you look at the machinery and the software alone, you got about $15,000-$20,000 tied up on that by, you know.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna make a shelf, like, you know, you need you need to spend money, otherwise you won't be able to do it. So yeah.
Like,
so you mentioned that you have a show coming up here in July. Do you have any other shows? Can you tell us about where people can go to see your shelves and buy them?
Well, we have a website.
Okay.
And we don't have any shows lined up yet, right, that you've heard of yet? July 13th, Tonga Hut, that's the one that will be going. And I'm sure there'll be a couple after that, you know, because right now, what's coming up?
Tiki Oasis.
Yeah, Tiki Oasis is coming up right now in
August.
In August. So people, you know, they have a tendency to hold on the shows because Tiki Oasis is the king.
Right.
The lahaina of a tiki, you know. So so we don't have anything planned right now.
Will you be vending at Tiki Oasis?
No, I will not do that. We did once. I will be attending. I'll be going.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But you know, for some reason there's a lot of people fly in, you know, to attend these shows, big events, and my items are kind of bulky and heavy and large, and so it's pretty difficult for them.
Right.
I have a story. Let me share this with you. We had a couple when the last Tiki Oasis we did. Remember that, Anna?
It wasn't Tiki Oasis. It was Portland, Oregon.
No. It was in San Diego.
Oh, it was. Okay.
We were vending with Buzz Rhino. Anyways, this couple from Germany were there, and they were in my shelf. And as a matter of fact, it was a 3-tier, and they didn't know. They say, "Oh my God, I have we don't know how to. We won one. But we don't know how to take it back to Germany." No problems. I told them go to Target or Walmart. I showed him. I went in my phone. I showed him where they were, and buy a suitcase that is this big, certain size, and I need. And they said, "Oh, good, thank you." And I didn't hear. You know, I said, "Oh, these people are never going to come back." Guess what? Next day, there he came with a suitcase. And I said, "Wow!" And he bought the shelves and was able to take it back to Germany in that suitcase.
When there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
He listened to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your website. Is there anywhere else people can go to see you? Do you have an Instagram or?
Yes, we do. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook as well. We always get requests from Facebook. A lot of Facebook requests.
Okay.
Yeah, when I see that so and so wants to send you a message, oh my God! So we get in contact with them right away, and most of them come through, and others don't. Yeah, and all over the United States, again, all over the world, England. I sell to Australia. Been selling to, of course, Germany a couple of times. Make shipments, and boy, and Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple, and boy, that is expensive shipping.
I'm sure.
I bet.
Yeah.
It costs more than sending it to Europe.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
I say, whoa. But
Would not have
what
guessed.
can you do?
Yeah.
I know.
Well, awesome.
Yeah, we sent the shelf to England and one to Hawaii, but the same week, and England was a lot cheaper than
Huh.
and it was a big island. I mean, it wasn't any. So anyway, my Instagram is the Tiki Gonzo. That's in Tiki Gonzo Art and Facebook,
Perfect.
where
Yeah.
they locate me.
Awesome.
Well, perfect. Well, we really appreciate you sitting down and taking the time with us, sir. For anyone who is listening to this via Spotify or a podcast, make sure hop on YouTube and check out the videos of what he was showing, or go on Instagram or any of the social medias. But we really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Aloha, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again to Tiki Gonzo for joining us on this week's episode. We had so much fun seeing your amazing creations, hearing your stories, and your process, your inspiration, and everything else. It was a real pleasure speaking with you. And thank you again to Mark Riddle for joining us on this week's episode and just making it another fun-filled, fantastic time for the both of us.
Yeah, this was an absolutely great time. Again, like Ellie said, thank you both so much. Make sure you go on social media, check them out. For Mark Riddle, you can check him out, like we said, on Digitiki.com if you want to listen to the Quiet Village podcast or radio show, or you can check him out on Spotify. You can also find Mark on Instagram at MarkRiddle31. And for Tiki Gonzo, make sure you hop on Instagram, Facebook, whatever you prefer. Check out his shelves. And you can find him at the Tiki Gonzo on all the social medias.
Of course, all of that will be linked down in the show notes below. And be sure to check out the marketplace that Tiki Gonzo will be vending at coming up here in just a couple weeks in July.
And you can find us on Instagram at the Tiki Talk Show, all one word, or Kona Cove _Home Tiki Bar. And that's on Instagram. Again, you can also find us on Facebook at our Facebook group, The Tiki Talk Show. If you search that, those are all separate words there. Make sure you join. Again, just answer all the questions and everything. We'll hopefully have you in pretty quick. For anyone that's interested, we now have some stickers. We have some cool merch and everything. We love getting that out to you guys. So if you guys want that, just hit us up. Let us know. We're always about sharing Tiki Ohana. We love when you guys share the photos of it wherever it ends up in the world. And we have a couple different listeners we want to thank. Some of the people have sent us some really, really cool packages. We have Josh Collins and Bab Collins, who were with the Luau all the way out in Australia, sent us a super cool book, some postcards. We have Seth had sent us all the way out in Colorado, sent us this really cool picture of Don the Beachcomber and a postcard. So for all the people who are sending us some cool stuff, we really appreciate you. And again, really just a big mahalo to all of you. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us on this week's episode, and we look forward to talking to you again in another 2 weeks.
Until then.